31, 2 for the price of 1. Calocetus POV. The insect coming out of the skullcrawler was in fact not one but two. The two were currently pure white, but it was starting to change and they were touching each other's forehead, the insect's equivalent of a forehead. I didn't notice earlier since there wasn't anything living, but I could now see soul, and the two only had one soul that was making a tunnel between the two. It was a color that humans would not be able to comprehend if they could see it. It was shaped like the larvae they were before but curled around itself. In the middle of its curl was the figure of a wasp and a Hercule beetle, both in the same position as their physical counterpart. All were connected and protected in an iridescent sphere. I made one member of the flock fly out and its soul was in a similar sphere. The figure of a manta-ray bird hybrid was in. The sphere was connected to the other members of the flocks, each individual was distinguishable, and this formed a network, and this network is connected to me, but the connection with me is different. I'm the conductor with the baton and they are the orchestra. The rest was blurry. That means souls are affected by the body and species, as expected. Why wouldn't they? I wonder what mine would look like. I made a wormhole above my body to see my soul, but got nothing. It wasn't as if I didn't have a soul, but I only could see the sphere but nothing past its boundary. Why? Anyway, still curious, I made a small wormhole above a city on Earth. Human souls were also iridescent spheres and the figure inside was similar to the human in question, to every minute detail even if they were blurrier than animals on Selim. Of course, their souls didn't have clothes, not that it changed anything for me. Dogs don't wear clothes but humans aren't embarrassed by that fact. The same logic applies here. There wasn't a color difference that would potentially indicate if the human was good or bad. Who would judge them if they are good or bad anyway? Same for the mystical concept of karma. Good and bad are purely subjective and will always be. Maybe an invincible sky daddy or whatever bullshit people use to justify themselves, who knows, they might think that raping a baby is a good deed and that helping for charity is a capital sin. If there is a God, something really and truly omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, it wouldn't be an individual like a human since it is omnipresent, it is literally everything. Including myself. That is my point of view. I closed the wormhole, my attention back on the two insects. Their exoskeleton and wings are now completely colored. One was similar to a Hercule beetle, a black chitinous body, with coppery wings, 3 sets of clawed and spiky legs, orange fur between the back and the abdomen, orange eyes, and a head adorned with 2 horns that took nearly half of his body length. The second was smaller and was more similar to a wasp, but there was reassembled with her other bigger body. She had black chitinous, a bipedal stance on her hind legs that were like a cat in posture, the middle like the arms of a gorilla would, and 2 small front limbs similar to pincers. She had a sharp stinger at the end of her abdomen, orange eyes, coppery wings, and a sole horn, considerably smaller than the 2 on her other self. I reoriented my body to face them. The 2 also turned and faced me and immediately bowed. "You are Tick," I declared to the bigger, "and you are Tack," I said to the smaller one. French name for Chip and Dale. Both seemed pleased with their name if the happy chittering of their mandible and wings is an indication. I made a follow me gesture with 2 of my front flippers, and both of the Titan wings started to flap, faster and faster, until it would have been a blur to human eyes. Something commendable with their sizes, especially Tick. There also was a very, very loud buzzing sound and he made a lot of wind and dust fly on takeoff. Beetles are usually loud when flying, so one the size of a plane will be much, much louder than its Earth counterpart. We flew where Poyo and Olaf were playing frisbee with a certain face-hugger starfish, Peach, who seemed resigned to its fate. Olaf the Ice Titan stopped playing and ran in my direction while his tail was wagging. Poyo was surprised and ended up missing Peach, who flew in my direction. I presented the new Titan, which was at the same time 2 Titans, and told them that killing and crippling each other was forbidden but everything else was fair game. 1 month passed without me doing much, so I scooted the hyperspace in search of other interesting universes. There was one with a planet where humans hunted animals with bipedal cats as companions. The reaction of the spiky dragon with 2 huge horns on his head when he noticed me was priceless. He made a high-pitched screech of utter terror and despair before flying away as fast and far as he could. The group of humans who also saw my eye through the wormhole immediately panicked and started to run away except one that scoffed at the other and shot at my eye with her strange crossbow Gatling gun hybrid thingy. Her cat had also abandoned her. I was feeling peckish. She tasted better than Kim and was extra crunchy and tasty with her armor made of hide, bone, claw, and scale of other animals. I will use this planet as a training ground for my children. Poyo for example is already 2 times bigger than the dragon that I scared shitless earlier. I know some beings in it are strong, even if the word strong might bit of an exaggeration for them. Anyway, this was one of the scarce universes where I found something interesting immediately where the time dilation was not ridiculously different from my home universe. I prefer when time passes the same, or a bit faster but not to an extreme degree. Most of the time I find a universe, I appear in the space between galaxies. But repeating this process 1,000 times will lead to the apparition of good results like the one with the stupid hunter lady. On another note, I was currently at the bottom of the abyss. At this level there wasn't anything living except black shadowy figures with purple-tipped wings and tails. They can't interact with pretty much anything and make howling sounds, they instantly die in contact with any source of daylight or my body light or when they are above this level of the abyss. Otherwise, they are pretty much unkillable. I looked down at the Force Priestess seated on a chair made of gray stone. In front of her was a gray stone table with chocolate chip cookies on a gray stone plate. In front of her was Alan seated on a chair adapted to his body. He flicked one of his floating back arms and a green holographic piece of paper with a green holographic pen appeared. Anger couldn't speak without the Force, her face was a mask of constant anger after all. Though she could eat, her real mouth was below her chin, it was just not made to speak, she could only make gurgling sounds with meaningless clicks. She also learned how to walk, something she seems to despise while she is also proud of that at the same time. A 2-year-old human toddler was still better than her that it will pass for an Olympian champion in comparison, however. It's one of the monthly sessions where we communicate. She learned to write in Arch, the architect's equivalent of English. I also learned this language while at it and Alan took the metric system and mixed it with the architect's one. Anger took the pen and stared at it with contemplation, she was like this for 5 minutes until she wrote, "I will comply." Alan's idea to use foods worked, the cookie that she seemingly loved was my input though. Nonetheless, she was persistent, 6 months in a chamber made in an area of the abyss with time dilation and without food. She might survive but that didn't mean she didn't feel hunger. 32, Space Dolphin. Third-person POV. 3 days later. Anger could be seen standing in front of a wormhole that opened to the Star Wars universe. It didn't lead to the galaxy but was just one tiny light year away. The Force not being able to go this far out of the galaxy. She had a bag of cookies in her hands, as a goodbye gift. She looked behind to see the monster, no, the god that could go against the Force itself, master of gravity, and can travel through the fabric of space and time better than any technology or powers she has seen in her immortal life. It was a very humbling experience for someone like Anger, she must go back to the Force, not for her. But for the Force and her sisters, they were pillars in the Force. She was too proud and wrathful until now to realize her folly. Every life form in the galaxy is dependent on the Force to live. This wasn't the case in this universe, it shook her to the core when she learned this, but it did go against everything she learned. And the very one-sided deal, to let Caelicides do whatever he wants in the galaxy without the Force Priestess's direct or indirect interventions and the galaxy's supermassive black hole won't disappear or swallow the galaxy whole. She didn't know if he was bluffing but even if he wasn't strong enough to do that at the moment, it was at the moment. And so she walked through the portal before she felt herself be propelled in the galaxy direction with a push of gravity. You almost seemed disappointed by her departure, Alan. Alan heard the 3 mixed voices of his king through the telepathic link he made earlier this morning. Yes, yes your majesty, Caelicides heard the answer after 10 seconds of silence. He made the equivalent of a shrug and teleported away. Alan was saddened by the loss of such a great test subject even though he got 3 Homo sapiens yesterday, it is the most spread sapient species on planet Earth. The 3 were people that nobody will care if they disappeared and they were volunteers, since they were asked by Kayla Cetus with different means if they wanted to go to another world. Let's say that one was a bit too excited when he was transported to his lab in the abyss. The now ex-male human ran, jumped, and climbed the stairs. He became a living pile of muscles after a short but visibly agonizing process. The most fascinating part was how he kept his sanity and mind intact. In the center of the Milky Ways, space distorted as Kayla Cetus appeared. He was 375 billion kilometers, 233 billion miles, away from the supermassive black hole, in its event of the horizon. This black hole is essentially the heart of the Milky Way and is equivalent to 10% of the galaxy's total mass. It holds everything in the galaxy together from flying into space. He could feel the incredible power of the black hole from this distance, not that he couldn't from Mars, but there was quite a huge difference. It was also bombarding nearly all of his senses. It is fundamentally more powerful than anything else he ever made until now. Though, he knew he could affect it in some way, but it was a bad idea since it would have a galaxy-wide effect. It's like poking a needle through a human's heart. He resisted the black hole hold quite easily for the power it had. He felt his heartbeat accelerate to compensate and the instinctual feeling of excitement. Overall it was quite an intoxicating feeling. Kayla Cetus' usual heartbeat was normally 1 beat per minute and here it was 3. The reason for his excitement was that a sound through the graviton made by the supermassive black hole. It was like echoes from a distant past. This echo was similar to the sound he made. He couldn't decipher 99% of it, too withered and damaged by time, but it was still from his species. He stayed for 5 Earth days before teleporting to the moon. The flora was more diverse and spread. He fed himself on the surrounding dark matter and swarm of flying shrimp for 3 hours. Expelling pure water from his blowholes and overall making the moon's atmosphere denser than it was before. He stocked most of the life energy he made in a small, average human height and some bigger or smaller, but numerous crystals on his body. They mostly were around his rostrum, back, and his throat pleats. After this little snacking time, he made a wormhole and used a phone through it with the sleeping owner's hand. He didn't look through the male teenager's research history. He looked at every zoo, aquarium, aquapark, rehabilitation center, etc. around the world and their exact location and made wormholes above every one of them. On Earth, SeaWorld Orlando. Madison Russell and her mother Emma Russell were looking with more or less disgust at the orca encounter, killer whale presentation. They were in the front row, the one closest to the pool where the killer whales were. They were here because Madison wanted to see killer whales in the flesh and it was her birthday. Her mother warned her that it might not exactly be like she dreamed of. She was young and naive. Emma also wanted to prove to her daughter a point was the reason they were here. She knew her daughter was smart and will connect the dots. The performance was going as usual until the performer's head on the back of the killer whale suddenly disappeared in a flag of light. The man fell off the sea Oreo back, the public laughed, he ended up in the water, he was alive but in total panic. His colleague, a middle-aged woman on the border was on the ground crying in agony, something was yelling in her colleague's voice inside her abdomen. The third human on the border started to float before he was flung so fast and so to the sky that he was vaporized by the friction of the air. The public started to cry in fear and confusion, some prayed, put themselves on the ground, some fainted, and some took videos and pictures of what was unfolding. An old woman somehow cried louder than the rest while pointing her wrinkled finger at the blood in the water, making others notice that the male performer was decapitated, his body at the bottom. Madison was more shocked than horrified by what just happened in those 3 seconds. She looked up and saw a wormhole, a blue gaseous-like substance pouring out, then the 3 sea Oreos in the pool started to float. "Mom! Please look," she tugged her mother's coat making her look where Madison pointed. "My God, it's Titania Cetus," Emma muttered, her body trembling in fear and excitement. She was part of the one that believed their British colleague on Skull Island about what she saw. Of course, the killer whales were also in shock, but different from the humans. It was followed by uncontrolled senses of euphoria and whatever they felt about the being that was causing all of this was an intense and pure sentiment of worship. This was happening all around the world. All of the cetaceans in captivity or in rehabilitation centers were seen floating with this same blue gaseous substance enveloping them, that coming from a wormhole in the sky. Caelicitas was uncaring for any structures or human damage and casualties he caused if the cetaceans weren't in a rehabilitation center, and even if they were, he cared very light for the humans there. He won't purposely make them die. All cetaceans' hearts in his grasp stopped simultaneously. They died, all killed at the same time by Caelicitas. The space whale could see from the hundreds of wormholes the sphere surrounding their respective souls starting to rapidly fade away. Holes started to appear in those spheres due to this, then blue light started to seep in from those holes, directly entering the core of the dying souls, changing them on the most fundamental of levels. Madison stared with morbid fascination as the three orcas started to get smaller, their skin changed color and texture, a new pair of eyes appeared, their flipper changed in shape and number, and their body changed shape, taking the general shape of a beluga. A piece of this blue gaseous substance slipped and floated close to her. She instantly grabbed it, to the horror of her mother. She looked at her hand and didn't see the blue life energy anymore. She didn't think much of it. She was back at staring even if her mother was dragging her away. Caelicitas didn't know of this, as he was currently reshaping the body of 2,569 cetaceans in their original forms at the same time, each one needing a certain degree of attention from him. Messing up was something he would prefer to prevent if possible. He was reviving the Astrod-Delphia after all. 33. Welcoming the Astrod-Delphia. Caelicitas POV. I was concentrating on the rebirth of thousands of cetaceans all around Earth. It was a long and tedious process. It only worked on them because they must be the descendants of Astrod-Delphia. They had the same feel but were extremely diluted. Also, the cause of my outburst of violence toward the handler that was using them as circus animals, was it was the first time I truly killed sapient being, and it was just a very unpleasant sensation and experience. For me they were like a human will see an ant, they were the ants, and I was the human in nearly every aspect. And I was at one point part of these ants. It put things into perspective of how much I have changed and will continue to do so. Hypocritical, but everyone is to varying degrees. I might be on the higher end and I don't care if I'm. And it also sends a very clear message to humanity as a whole: don't touch cetaceans to use them against their will. No one in the center that helped wounded cetaceans, rescued them, etc., died or was injured by me for that matter. I'm grateful for what they do, but that mostly ended here. My new ability to see souls affirmed my earlier supposition, which could have been totally wrong for all I know. I'm not omniscient and can be wrong. This discovery meant that at some point in time Astrod-Delphia were on Earth and went extinct. Maybe they were in such a low number that their only option was inbreeding, or they were seeing negative effects and they chose the next best solution. It must be more complicated than that, but that is one possibility. Or one individual simply fucked around, literally. Anyway, I needed to kill them all, which I did by stopping their heart again. I didn't like doing it, but that didn't stop me. It was necessary to access the core, as far as I know. Then I quickly reincarnated them into the form of Astrod-Delphia, which was showing great success. If I don't do it fast, the core of their soul will be damaged. It's not instantaneous and might take between 30 seconds and 1 hour. It also depends on the species, but limiting every damage possible when I can is always a plus. The newly revived Astrod-Delphia bodies sported similarities to their prior form. I more or less forced the blueprint of the Astrod-Delphis in them, thereupon changing their very being. Some looked like the mix of both. Even if the Astrod-Delphis was dominant, it was homogeneous, and none looked like the spawn of an elder god. At the moment they were all in a deep sleep, protected by me. Every human and threat approach will have their gravity inverted and start to get attracted to the sky. Of course, they will go down at some point, but in a way that they won't become a bloody stain of guts and bones on the pavement. The entire process took me 2 hours. Surprisingly, nearly no humans interfered. When I finished, I made all the revived Astrod-Delphia pass through wormholes that led to the moon, where I currently am. I made a clicking sound followed by a short whistle, and one by one they all started to wake up, confused, scared, and full of wonder. Then in the same order, they woke up and instinctively looked in my direction, my body glowing and illuminating the whole area below. They knew my location because all of them were connected to me and I let them know I was here. I was used to thinking like this. After all, it's similar to the flock, in a way that I could transfer data and they could send data back but not revive it if they died. I waited until they were all awake, the last one being awakened by the one next to him. A heavy sleeper. No sound found was made, total silence. Good. Hope you all sleep well, you are currently on the moon. I'm Caelicitas, the last Astrocetus and the one responsible for your current state of existence, I said calmly. Even if I was excited like the calf I was by their presence. As you can see, your body is different, you may come from all around the world, originally from different species, have different languages, have different cultures, have different lives, and be of all age, sex, and orientations. I tell you this simply to inform you that any action to intentionally harm in any way, shape or form one of your brethren, one of my children, or subordinates with malicious intention, will be severely punished. I killed you all one time, don't waste this second chance I gave you by forcing me to do it a second time, I added gravely with a loud click that made the mossy ground of the moon shake. I flapped my flippers and swam in the air downwards. They didn't fear me or what I told them, far from it. It only stirred the entire pod of nearly 2,500 to be happy, incredibly so. It was also mixed with a borderline outrageous level of respect and fanatical worship, it was overwhelming. All fangirl but hundredfold. Damn, is this level of worship even necessary? I thought, pretty much caught off guard, toning down the empathic link. I could tell a mother to eat her own newborn calf alive and they will joyfully do it as if it was the greatest of honor. Brainwashing seems cute in comparison, and it was just from their genes, it was their instinct that placed me and what I said above everything else. But they still maintained a personality and everything with it. They aren't brainless automatons. The nameless one that died must have felt that she was the worst thing in existence for failing Mom's mission, poor thing. It wasn't her fault. They didn't need a debriefing since most of the information was directly sent to their brains by me. I will let them do as they please, with certain rules obviously, such as not going to Earth unless I authorize it. Astrod-Delphia were made in the Astrocetus image. The best description of them will be a lesser version of an Astrocetus in all points. They even have a certain level of control over gravity. There was also a lesser version of an Astrocetus heart, its power was only a ridiculously small fraction of mine. One Astrod-Delphis couldn't make a black hole or go into hyperspace, but I presume an entire pod of 10 or so could if I gave them the exact coordinates and important detail. Yeah, now I can see why they have this level of fanatical loyalty. It's quality versus quantity. And in the past, there must have been billions of Astrod-Delphia. With this power, they could have made the artificial black at the center of the Milky Way, for example. And yes, artificial, because there was no way it wasn't one, or the entire galaxy would get sucked in with its power. I don't know how dense it is, but it sure is more than Sagittarius A** from my past life. Also, artificial is a word I don't really like since everything is essentially part of nature. Nature is the closest thing to God for me. It's not the mother nature or something that I found silly like this. The direct meaning of nature is, to put it simply, technically everything is natural. But one of the other definitions will insinuate that humans, or other sapience being are above or separated altogether from nature. As if. That means that even humans and what they do is completely natural. The expansion of the universe, it's natural. Every kink of humanity, it's natural. Politicians, murder, are at PE, war, poverty, etc., it's natural. Pollution even from humans and GMOs is, ironically enough, completely natural. The Ghidorah species is natural. Being billions of times stronger than me, it's natural. Potential people seeing my reality as something fictional will also be a part of nature. Natural doesn't always mean it's good, as if it was righteous in the first place or wanted to do good for whatever something that subjective truly means. It's something that greatly angered me in my past life. It's not because it's natural that it's fucking good. It's not hard to understand. Nature isn't, oh, the pretty little forest with little birdies singing on them and everything inside living in complete peace and freaking harmony. However, humans, oh human, they are unnatural monstrosities and should all die and burn in hell. Nature is neither ultimately good nor it is ultimately bad, it is both of them while also being neither and more. What matter at my scale is living how I want. I established my perception of nature in every Astrod-Delphia. They will interpret it themselves. Welcome to your new life as an Astrod-Delphis, I declared while pushing water out of my blowholes to add a dramatic effect. It even made a rainbow. Then I space jumped to Selim. It will take more time to teach my children not to eat the Astrod-Delphia. 34. The Hairless Ape's Reaction. The humans on Earth went into another uproar. They were even more common than usual. Caelicidas had killed in total with this event 16 humans, all deaths being gruesome in some way. Ranging from vaporization, hiding as a popsicle while playing hide and seek with the penguins in Antarctica, becoming a cube, to being impaled on one of the Eiffel Tower's many metal structures. Some like Popsicleman in the middle of Antarctica were still missing. The humans only found 10 bodies after all. The cetaceans reincarnated as Astrod-Delphia was seen as the equivalent of angels for a good majority of humans. This amplified the already wave of hate for wallers and people with jobs or culture involving the harm of cetaceans. Certain devout people of any belief can be extremely violent if something goes against what they thought was right. Let's say that they will have more blood to write their scripture with. It's a difficult process needing special tools, techniques, and the fresh blood of heretics, preferably directly coming from the source itself. It's something that stayed. It is pretty light compared to some of the other religious ways of treating heretics. The fact that the 10 found were all handlers of parks not known for their remarkable ethics, only furthered this earlier belief. Of course, the Celian collective took advantage of this. It made them even more credible than they already were, for one simple reason: they have authentic proof. The only thing they missed was what Caelicidas truly looked like. Not that it is fundamental when they have so much proof, and as if proof were even needed to make a religion. It wasn't science, that is why they generally don't go hand in hand. So a religion with factual proof exploded even more than it already was. The death of those humans by their god, while sad for some, was seen as a divine punishment for nearly all of the Celian. You see, Dr. Ilan Andrew was right. This thing can make life, no, create life, said an exasperated Rick Stanton with bloodshot eyes. He was always working, and one of the new projects he was working on was the new aerial base for Monarch. Essentially a futuristic giant plane. A flying fortress. Rick remembered the first time he saw Specimen Dawe. It's still on Skull Island and he hoped to never see it ever again. It was, to put it simply, incredibly creepy. It was harmless, but there were a lot of times where it was found where it shouldn't be, like his assigned chamber, for example, somehow evading all cameras and captors of the base. Anyway, he was still shocked by the dozens of videos of what happened yesterday. It again utterly violated what humans thought possible, not that it wasn't new with Titans. All of them did the same to some degree. Just Godzilla was still a mystery about how he could even survive his own weight, and that wasn't the most unique thing about this Titan. But Titanus Cetus certainly did take the cake. Bend gravity to his will, create/modify living beings at whim, what more? Travel to other universes and bring back fictional characters, as if. How does he do this? Serizawa muttered with fascination, stars shining in his eyes. It was more than impressive to see it happen. No matter how many times he saw. He would have preferred to be here in the flesh, but at least Emma Russell with her daughter at one of the locations, and she was one of the few that directly saw it in the entirety of Monarch. Emma didn't tell anything about what Madison touched. She didn't want her daughter to be dissected on a surgical table. She had faith in Serizawa for not saying anything. It was one of her friends after all, but the fewer people knew about this the better. Emma also hammered that fact into Madison's head, meaning her ex-Mary was in the unknown. He will go bonker when he learns about this little detail. For the moment nothing seemed wrong with her daughter, so she was mostly calm if extremely worried. It might affect her daughter at any moment in her life or not at all. This was extremely stressful for a mother who already lost a child to boot. Serizawa was also one of the few with access to Specimen Dawe DNA. It was a perfect mix between Jia, Island Andrew King, different species of plants, and an endemic bird of Skull Island. This was exceptional on its own, but the most bizarre fact about the DNA was that no mutations ever happened. Ever. It was very puzzling. Mutations were something constantly happening in everything containing the self-replicating molecule known as DNA, from viruses to cockroaches to humans. Mutations were not something inherently good or bad, this is simply the phenomena of DNA being altered with each cellular division, both meiosis and mitosis. New mutations were constantly popping up, there was no stopping it. Unless total deletion of everything with DNA, of course. It also wasn't exclusive to DNA, things like ARN could also have mutations. And that also means that everything with DNA was technically a mutant. Of course, DNA can be altered by other factors, directly or indirectly by things such as alimentación, radiation, and a lot of other things, but it's not really the subject here. The DNA of this specimen, if it can even be considered DNA at this point, was so stable that it didn't change at all. Never. Its ARN was in the same basket. Anything used to forcefully change it resulted in its total collapse and rendered it completely useless. It means this creature was more or less a complete middle finger to the current theory of evolution. That is why it was put apart from the rest for the moment, since it was created by unknown means, or it was the worst headache possible for the one that didn't believe what created it. For example, if it has an offspring that also made an offspring itself and this cycle continues somehow until the end of time, this individual at the end of time will be the literal clone to the first and every other born in between. They will be 100% identical at every single point. Identical twins will seem like complete strangers in comparison. It really does look like they are ascending to a higher plane of existence. How fascinating. And it seems to be a relation between cetaceans and Titanus cetus, Islandchen added with barely hidden excitement, which was soon followed by nods from the other. Which might explain the death, but why now, she continued, this time with a frown. Don't try to delve too deep in trying to understand the thought process of this Titan or why he does things, it's out of our scope, wisely advised Rick, and was going to take a sip of his coffee only to see it was farther from where he remembered placing it. Frustrated, he looked down only to see behind his coffee cup, a small green-furred animal, with a yellow beak, and 2 ears, in the middle of the two was a tuft of blue feather, 2 big watery eyes, and 2 human feet. Buddha, Dawei said, it didn't know where it was. But it knows how it got here. It was a strange round white door that always appeared below him and transported it to other locations. Traduction-bad. What the fuck? The old man jumped back, something he thought impossible for his age. His yell was fueled with terror, attracting the attention of nearly everyone on his person. Look, it's freakin' here, he said while pointing a finger at nothing but his empty cup. His mind come to a stop for a split second before the image of a certain whale passed in his mind. Yes, it's your coffee cup, and we have more important things to worry about than your coffee cup, said a puzzled and slightly annoyed Vivian Graham. On the other side of the globe, Madison Russell was back and was currently observing the pink moth on her hand. The moth moved on the palm of her hand where a very thin line of golden light appeared to instantly disappear just after. Must be my imagination, time to sleep anyways, she said, put back the moth in its terrarium, and jumped in her bed before falling. She had a dream about space and things in a language she didn't understand, that she will not remember the next day. 35, they didn't change that much, huh? Caelicitas POV. The pod of Astrod-Delphia divided itself into smaller, but not because of internal strife or anything like this. It was because they decided with my accord to be the overseer of the planets I was alpha of. The moon was never a jail to keep them in, to begin with, just a place for them to acclimate themselves to their new lives. Teach them, make them meet with my children, and overall it was a success. Except for Poyo, he didn't learn to not eat the Astrod-Delphia. Sadly for him they know this and stay far away from him. I accepted the proposition. It was indirectly asked in the most ridiculously polite and submissive tone I have heard. But I know what they wished from the start. That is why now Astrod-Delphia are found on the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Venus, and on a few other planets of the Milky Way. I can't be everywhere at once and at the same time, so that helps the flock can do the same, but they die off without me. And they also discover a lot of things I didn't know, such as which animals, plants, and mushrooms are poisonous and venomous. The reason for this research was quite obvious. They are pretty resistant to toxins, venom, poison, and everything foreign and harmful to their health, and they know it. Yet that didn't mean they were exactly immune either. With knowledge of the ones that weren't born in captivity and also mine about biology and things like this in general, thanks to this they learned the joy of drugs and that not the only joy they discovered or rediscovered for some. They are free to do whatever they want within the few sets of rules declared by me, so they mostly do what they want. It's not like they can hide anything from me or the others for that matter. And I safely say that I know too much about their private life, the price of my paranoia. I think they are equal in their degenerate potential with humanity. At least their population will increase, not that they necessarily do this with that in mind. They are very open-minded and they don't have the same social norm as humans, they are very direct with one another. Anyway, they disliked humans, which is not surprising. They can share emotions, memories, and feelings with the hive mind, but they know that not everything is not black or white. Speaking of the hive mind, I recently felt a strange but brief connection that happened 1 month ago. It felt to me like a blurred radio signal in the hive mind, and it only stayed for not even half a second before disappearing. It was slightly worrying, but I still could trace its origin, and it was from Earth. For a brief moment, it stayed. I could sense that it was a strange Astrod-Delphis, a very strange one, barely an Astrod-Delphis. I instantly realized with this that I was responsible for whatever was going on, which greatly decreased my worry, but I still searched for the origin anyways. I didn't find it, I didn't even know what to look for, to begin with. This is why I was using one of my brains to its nearly full capacity to detect any perturbation and catch the thing that did this, if it was on purpose or not. I know where most of Monarch's bases are now, thanks to the Furby abomination. I simply followed with a wormhole where their vehicles went. That is why some Monarch's employees mayhaps has felt that objects have changed places or spontaneously disappeared before reappearing. I didn't really care about the organization. Certainly, one of their goals was for humans to try and live in harmony with Titans, but let's be real. Probably the only reason they aren't extinct is that most Titans simply do not care about them, or simply found them interesting because it was sapient species, and humans have numerous advantages that make them surpass the other. The fact that humanity causes global environmental and ecological problems is, I think, pretty meaningless to them. They are for most extremely old beings. Another mass extinction won't change much. Life will flourish again after. What is the destruction of the Amazon forest to a random Titan older than it by multiple times? Nothing, that's it. It will continue to live as if nothing happened, or regrow another forest. At least that's how I feel. The lives of others I don't know. It has become even cheaper to me since I can make life happen in even the most inhospitable environment. Only the planet in itself has value, and in the future, I could probably make one too. Life is believed to be extremely valuable because it's believed to be unbelievably rare. So changing its believed rarity caused its value to change, to go down immensely. Emotional attachment and culture also play a role in its value, so it counts, but it's variable. The problem with the Titans in general is that they don't consider humans as a potential threat to their life. Even me, and I know every sapient species like humans, if under the right condition, have incredible potential and can be considered a potential threat if left totally unattended. But not all Titans can survive multiple nukes like Godzilla or me, who can simply stop them and send them back to the sender. My body is allegedly not the most physically resistant thing in existence. I know I tested, and the surface of the sun is damn hot. Of course, it was because my shields were deactivated at the time. I could make an impermeable bubble of wormholes that suck the heat and everything else to transport it elsewhere and move to the core like this. This is in theory, since there is a ridiculously high chance that the sun's gravitational pull fuck up my shield in some way. Not counting that this shield is still a work in progress. And that the plasma, being millions of degrees Celsius, will pour into my protective bubble, and I think this level of heat is a tad too much for my poor and innocent body at the moment. Going back on the topic of nuclear warheads, I ate all of my stock, the ones that I permanently borrowed from the motherland. Next, I will try the one from the land of freedom and oil, then the one from the land of baguette and omelette au fromage, the one from the land where everything remotely phallic-shaped is considered an aphrodisiac, without forgetting the last of the top 5, the island where the being probably older than time itself reside. There are other countries with nuclear power, but later, it's not like anyone will tell that their nukes were stolen in the first place, at least highly unlikely. I thought of something and immediately warped away from Mars to the beautifully and originally named planet Kepler 22b. It was some 638 light-years away. Crack. I looked at the red sea of the planet that was bigger than what humans estimated, being 2.7 times as wide as Earth, instead of 2.4, 0.3 more. And of course, I visited other planets, but most are simply dead and useless pieces of rock. Those ones sometimes had the remainder of civilization. It was the second planet where life is present without my direct intervention, the first being Earth. My presence still greatly affected the life on it. Species went extinct and new species appeared at an accelerated pace. I swam near the sea level, making the water full of red microalgae go against the planet's gravitational pull. This is due to my personal gravitational pull, the one that keeps me levitating and, as I have seen, potentially mortal to a human. I guess the human body is not made to be pulled into two different directions or doesn't like sudden changes in gravity. The planet was 100% covered in water, but only a third of it was deeper than 4 meters. The most common life form other than the red microalgae were headless three-legged animals, with 2 tear-shaped ears, a spine, and a strange back that let them filter and feed on the algae. Also, they followed the color theme of this planet, red. Hundreds of Astrod-Delphia were moving, building houses, statues of me, temples of me, pretty much everything as me in it. I'm still not used to this level of worship. They worked in small groups, everyone being in perfect synchronization thanks to the hive mind. They were creating a city. The start was rocky as they didn't know anything about it. I didn't give them the knowledge about this. If I continue to give them everything on a platter, they will become lazy. Even from this distance they still could communicate with the ones in the Sol system. 36, biggest moon of Neptune. Calicitus POV. I was looking at a universe through a wormhole in hyperspace. This was one of the universes with many neighbors, and it was a strange one. Neighbors in a sense that it has an intricate connection to others, one with Mecca, one was a nearly exact copy of my old one, and a dozen more. First, it was made of only one planet, which was flat by the way. It was enclosed in a multilayered sphere that was protecting it. It also somehow connected every time period of this world together. It was a bit similar to a river with millions of branches. Because it was literally one. And most of the strangeness is explained by the fact that it's a Xianxia world, precisely the Reverend Insanity universe, or it's one really similar to it. It was so unusual that the only possible way it could even exist and not immediately crumble on itself is that it was created by something making it possible, which proved that I could make my own universe. It had hundreds of little connections to other universes that took the souls of dead people, only human souls thought. The travel was harsh, more than 99% died, the rest suffering more or less damage due to the soul's nature to easily dissipate without some sort of protection. I couldn't really enter it since I was blocked by the universe itself. The only way would be to use the connection or slash and brute force my way through, but it will cause great damage to the universe, and potentially the same for the ones it's connected to. Maybe this connection is what makes it stable enough to not collapse on itself. I want to see other universes like this just to see the difference. Nonetheless, I could make small wormholes directly inside to peep in, but that was the extension of my influence without using brute force. It was a dying universe anyway. It didn't expand like the other, it did the opposite. Funny thing is that Reverend Insanity exists as a novel in my universe too. My wormhole led to one of the voids of this world. This void had millions of floating landmass ranging from island to continental in size. It was the outermost of this universe. Oh, a creepy old man, I thought as I saw a frail and decrepit human moving in space. His soul was strange and very blurry, a mix between a young lad with blonde hair and his current appearance. I opened a wormhole just in front of him. He froze, his mouth opening and closing repeatedly, his eyes bulging. He looked like a madman. His body started to tremble in excitement. He reached his hand to the wormhole, hesitating to touch it for half a second before plunging his hand only to remark he just hit an invincible wall. Everything made of matter will not go through, and most energy too. His face rapidly passed through a myriad of emotions, most being related to despair, anger, fear, and madness. Funny man. He must be one of the venerable, the thief maybe. Yes, it's the thief. I confirmed it as a sort of giant mecha 2 times my size started to form around his body. I made another wormhole that showed his home universe and the mecha ready to attack froze and rapidly started to destroy itself. He floated close to it, tears trickling down his cheek as he stared at his old world. Again, I closed every wormhole and warped to seal him, it just happened again. The connection to the hive mind. It was a dream, of a little girl about space, ah. Now I understand what happened, she was touched by life energy and it was with the Astrod-Delphia blueprint infused into it. Can't do much. Unless I kill her, but I want to see how it will affect her. I still couldn't exactly pinpoint her, but she was in the United States. She doesn't have access to the hive mind database, but she has access to the most shared information in it, which is images of space, stars, and such. If she had access to more, her brain will likely melt due to the information overload. Good could have been way worse, I internally thought. I looked down to see Poyo roll in the mud, ignoring him I warped to Triton, the biggest moon of Neptune. It's the second time I have come here, there is this same all-encompassing presence of peace. It's weird, I feel calmer here and it's not affecting or even touching my mind. I just feel calm here. I was here to find this Lady Io, the nameless Astrod-Delphia talked about. There is something here, but exactly where in Triton I don't know. That's why I'm excavating this moon, taking a big chunk of ice. Some Astrod-Delphii were also here, doing the same but at a smaller scale, and compared to me they could go into the numerous caves found here. I'm simply way too big for this. I took another chunk of ice, throw it away, and could finally see liquid water below, an ocean covering the entirety of this moon. I entered the ocean head first, making hundreds of tons of water fly everywhere. It was dark, the only source of light being me. I was a golden disco whale in the middle of the ocean. I emitted clicks at regular intervals to map out the surrounding with my echolocation. The deeper I goes, the stronger the aura of calmness amplified. I didn't like it and so I resisted it, making everything seem clearer. Come here Corky 2 and with your squad, I called one of the Astrod-Delphia through the hive mind. She was a captured orca and was in a sea park before I revived her. She chose to not change her name as a reminder of her past. I know every single one of them better than themselves, from their every like and dislike to their hobby, secrets, and beyond. That is why I can safely say that I know too much, but I can't even physically forget, and I'm the source of the hive mind. I have access to everything inside. The little girl is the current exception as she wasn't really part of it, for the moment. I'm on my way, Holy Emperor, she replied with enthusiasm. Corky 2 is one of the older I revived, she is if we keep her age before she was revived 49 years old. And she called me like this, which I didn't have a problem with. Each Astrod-Delphia has its own way of calling me, but every one of them was respectful and showed their extreme devotion to me. She was more familiar with me than most, she had this shameless grandma vibe and mostly acted as such, only showing restraint when I'm physically present. She was relaxed and calm in my presence as she knew I was young and took pity on me. Since I'm orphaned, everyone knew about this, but most simply deeply believed that pitying me was like they insulted me in the worst way possible and the Astrocitus with me, or that I simply couldn't have any fault. So it's a breath of air. I can understand why they can be extremely stressed in my presence. I'm way bigger than even the biggest of them by 20 times, the instinctual worship they have for me, and simply that I'm an alpha. They also all knew my age, even if my age is strange. My body is technically around 65 million Earth years old, but I have been truly alive since my reincarnation, so roughly 8 years. My mental age is something that also regressed with my reincarnation, and it's a funny concept in the first place. However, they didn't know I was reincarnated, maybe in the far future but not now. It was a secret that in reality wouldn't change anything if I shared it with them, but I simply didn't tell them because I didn't want to. She swam to my left flank with her squad exclusively composed of young adult males. Yes, they do what they want and they stay true to their Earth's origin. Horny XC Oreo. She was already pregnant, like many others, and for who is the father that only genetics will tell. My earlier clicks finally came back to me, and this is surprising, but not unpleasant. There was a city, a giant underwater city. Tower going 36 kilometers high, houses with unique but beautiful architecture, statues of Astrod-Delphia, and a dragon. It only had one head. I instantly warped to the abandoned city with the squad of Astrod-Delphia. Most ended up disoriented by the suddenness of my action. Heh, I made an amused click as one of the beefier Astrod-Delphis planted head first in the sediment. His mood passed from horror to extremely proud of himself, when he heard my click. Is this that IO person? I thought in skepticism. It was vaguely like a Ghidorah but with only one head. So it was the statue of a classical Western dragon. It had a slender body, 2 large unfolded wings replacing the front limbs, 2 muscular legs, and a long tail curled in an S shape. A long neck that ended in a reptilian head with multiple sets of long pointy horns growing from its cheeks, the horns later curved upward. It was softly smiling, a unique expression for a lizard. Probably terrifying for a human. And finally embedded on the top of its forehead was a moon crescent made of gold, but the upper part was broken. 37. History lesson on Triton. Third-person POV. The space whale analyzed the statue in front of him, and the Astrod-Delphia were exploring the surrounding, letting their god do his very important god thing. Now where is the real one? The space whale wondered. 2 of his eye were studying the statue while the other 4 did the same, but with the underwater city, he ordered the flock to do the same as the Astrod-Delphia. It was made with efficiency in mind. Everything was made with the idea of self-sufficiently, but its visibility wasn't able to resist time, especially its inhabitants. There were hundreds of thousands of pods made to fit Astrod-Delphia, but none of the latter were here. Making the place early. Half of the building showed traces of deterioration, but it was impressive that it was only some superficial deterioration. Only things such as faded paint, random scratches, and slightly tilted buildings took into account that it was more than 65 million years old. The energy was still running, making the city glow a soft sky blue color. The entire hive mind momentarily froze. Every being connected to Caelicitas at that moment felt their body and mind stop working. On Earth, Madison was also affected. She was drinking her hot chocolate when it happened, and her body started to shake with a bowl full of boiling hot chocolate in hand. The shaking started to make the chocolate spill all over her face, body, and blue pajama. The hot chocolate hardly made her react, as it strangely didn't hurt her in any way. It was in fact only slightly warm. Eve =_ T and thing ISSL = I/T and cal. Dachshund. Everything is alright, calm down. She heard the strange, reassuring and extraordinarily powerful superposition of 3 aliens and clearly distinct voices speaking in perfect unison, in her mind. Her nose started to bleed just after, but her blood was with a neon blue tint, instead of simply dark red. The connection was then cut, but her shaking didn't stop. Maddie? Sweetheart. Are you alright? Her mother cried out, running in panic to her daughter. She took the bowl out of the little girl, ignoring the pain as it spewed on her hands. Epilepsy fit. But. She never had. No, that is not the time for this kind of question. She rapidly analyzed the situation and immediately caught her daughter falling from her chair. With difficulty, Emma placed her extreme care on the carpeted floor, then took the chair away. She was staring helplessly and in shock at her convulsing daughter on the soft carpet. She didn't know what was going on or if doing anything more might worsen things. It looked like an epilepsy fit. So she took the immediate measure of safety for this kind of situation. Madison then suddenly stopped moving. Emma felt her heart until she saw her daughter's chest going up and down while she started to snore. Madison just fell asleep. Her mother sighed in relief. She then strolled closer and crouched with tears in her eyes. She took a handkerchief from her pocket and started to clean her daughter's nosebleed, the most worrying part, and it was of a strange color. I urgently need to sleep, my daughter having blue blood, presumptuous, Emma thought, brushing it off at her lack of sleep. And that it was her imagination. She didn't remember the last time she had a full night's sleep, or really slept at all these last few days for that matter. She delicately picked up the sleeping form of her daughter in her arms, as if Madison was going to break at any moment. 10 minutes later Emma looked at her daughter sleeping in bed. She was changed and they were in the little girl's room. The walls were filled with posters of whales and moths. Back to Caelicitas, who felt the connection but couldn't care less at the moment. Even with his message, the entirety of the Astrod-Delphia were scarred. not for their life but if something bad happens to their god. Carlasidas hammered in their thick skull of there that he wasn't that powerful in the grand scheme of things. And that they were simply big fish in a small pond, without even knowing if the pond was not bigger than they expected. Also that any potential threat to their existence should never in any case be considered lightly and be underestimated. For very obvious reasons. A good enemy is a dead enemy. The brief shutdown of the hive mind was a very good justification for panic, as the heart making it work is Carlasidas himself. Its shutting down mostly equal to the space whale's death, or that something grave happened to him. Or that he decided to do this for shit and giggles, which he would never do. Mass hysteria after the hive mind came back on was expected, and Carlasidas forcefully calmed down everyone. The cause for this was in front of one member of the flock. It was a status of an Astrocitus, his mom. He briskly warped to its location, cutting a piece of building as he did so. The next instant he was in the center of the city. The statue was real-life-sized, it was 3 times bigger than him. He appeared like a small child in comparison. He technically is a child, a stupidly powerful one, but still one. Something he usually didn't think much, but it was quite flagrant here. The space whale knew it was a statue, but it was hyper-realistic, so much so that it triggered a powerful instinctual response, as a part of him truly believed it was his mom. Yes, as I thought, a statue with the use of technology to make it even more realistic, he thought, disappointed and slightly sad. Those feelings rapidly disappeared as he began to explore this area. All around the state of Terrasitas, Carlasidas' mother was 4 metallic pillars decorated with sculpture. Those pillars were respectively aimed at each of the cardinal points of Triton. The structure supporting those pillars could rearrange itself when the cardinal point changed. Those writings and sculptures described the creation of this universe, the first Astrocitus, the discovery of the universe, the creation of different species, exploration of other universes. The first encounter between the Ghidorah and Astrocitus, which surprisingly didn't end up in bloodbath encounters with spacefaring civilizations that ended most of the time badly for them. One of the first meetings ended with a calf killed and her heart taken and used as a way to travel through hyperspace. It could warp the entire planet the size of Jupiter away. Of course, it was only used 1 of 2 times. It wasn't enough to escape the wrath of the mother. It wasn't the only one, others particularly aimed at the young one. It was suicidal, but they didn't care. Those civilizations that did have successful hunts were soon completely eradicated, but that didn't stop others from trying. Far from it. A juvenile Astrocitus heart has the capacity to infinitely generate energy as long as it's best and generate gravity that could be controlled with certain tools, and this is just some of its peculiarity. The creation of the first Astrod-Delphia was soon followed by billions of years-long war between the Astrocitus and Ghidorah caused due to the rising tension between the 2 species. It caused death and carnage on both sides. It ended with the strange Ghidorah he saw on Venus sealed in another universe made by the remaining Astrocitus and the first Astrocitus. Carlasidas noted that it had 12 eyes and not 14. This universe/dimension created was the definition of hell, insanity, and madness. It was a broken mess where everything was real and not the same. Thoughts, dreams and nightmares became real and at the same time nothingness and insanity. Left, right, up, down, space, time, creation, destruction, life, death, etc. didn't have any real meaning inside. It was made to transform whoever went inside into a mindless lumbering mess of insanity and nothingness. Carlasidas could somehow read the strange symbol and text written, and he was unconsciously murmuring them. He could also recognize some of them. He recognized Ghidorah, a familiar 3-headed dragon with one of the heads having the same crescent broken horn on the statue he saw earlier. This dragon later lost 2 heads, forever, becoming the same as the statue. This dragon seemed to also be considered as an ally compared to the status of mortal enemies its brethren had. Some of the parts were missing, the one to blame probably being time, and everything must be taken with a grain of salt. Still, Carlasidas didn't know how he should about what he just learned, even for him. It was a bit much as it entailed so many things. One of his eyes looked down to bulge out as he saw the floor opening to reveal what he believed was Lady Io. He didn't do anything rash as the white dragon was connected to tubes and cables and in a sort of praying posture, alimenting the city. And it seemed to be of her own free will. 38, Io. The white dragon groggily moved. Her eyes behind her eyelids, her mind fuzzy, confused, body stiff, she felt incredibly drained and weak. Caelicitas looked at the waking dragon, ready to kill her at any moment's notice, just in case. The clasp holding her wings and legs in place unlocked, she stayed in place thanks to a pad below, the cable and tube connected did the same as the claps. The light permeating the million-year-old city turned off for the first time in millions of Earth years, and backup batteries swiftly took the place of the now disconnected kaiju. The water of the entire city started to drain, and at the same time a giant dome formed above, galaxies, nebulae, star systems, solar systems, etc. The space whale took heed of this, but it wasn't his main focus. The Astrod-Delphia had a more powerful reaction and were calmed by Corky too. "Are you this, Lady Io?" She jolted awake as she heard three cold voices speaking in perfect unison to her. She tried to land graciously on the metallic ground to only stumble and catch herself with a flap of her wings. Her eyes slowly opened and she looked up, golden and white pupils met, she kept her gaze fixed on the whale above. Her mind froze as she remembered things from a very long time ago, and as if a flip inside switched, her broken horn glowed as she jumped and directly flew in front of Caelicitas. "Ah," the space whale thought as he failed to catch her in his gravitational grasp, it was like grasping light. Something he had difficulty with, too much power needed to directly control it, blocking and reacting to it was fine though. "You look like her." She succeeded, did what her name ah yes it's Ergia, did she succeed too? The pearl-white dragon muttered, amazement and sadness could be heard in her voice. "Are you this, Lady Io?" he repeated. This time it was rhetorical, he finally got a grasp of her as the white dragon let it happen and couldn't keep it up for long either. "Indeed I'm Io, titles and everything after are meaningless, but we were known as the Moon. This is in the past and a part of the price for me to be here," Io said. She remembered things she would have preferred to have forgotten. She looked like a beaten dog. "Well hello, Io. I'm deeply sorry for what you must have gone through." "I'm Caelicitas," he said, his voices changing from cold to neutral then to somewhat warm. Being cold and aggressive was mostly out of his instinctual hate for the Ghidorah species than anything else. He didn't hold any grudge against her, and if what the mural said is true then she was an ally, a very reliable one. He was ashamed of himself for even act this way in the first, but she didn't seem to particularly care. Io nodded, a smile on her muzzle. She landed on the ground panting. She was exhausted. The city as if alive made one of the backup batteries appear out of a hole in the ground and was chugged down her throat. "Is the city sentient or possibly sapient or just pre-programmed to so? Caelicitas asked out of curiosity. "Yes, for the third, it was designed by the Astrod-Delphia to only do specific and simple tasks such as this. They feared that a rebellion, something along those lines, might happen if they made it this way." Her body after the battery was visibly healthier, but that didn't make her magically recover. "What did you mean exactly by succeeded?" he asked. "A wormhole was formed, 3 batteries filled with energy generated by a machine Allen. It was the closest thing to a perpetual machine, but contrary to one, it generated energy with the help of gravity. She thanked the whale and ate each one, but it was like a drop in the ocean. She won't be fully operational for some time. Teresitas managed to give birth to you. It's one of the reasons we even fled. She was always an oddball, she didn't want you to die at any cost. It started after her mate died." She breathed in and continued. "She did something that was considered madness, and everyone with her paid the price in some way. Moving through time in a universe not designed for this is costly for us and dangerous for the universe. For being of our power level it only becomes worse." Io trailed off, forcing herself to continue. But it was her only choice, the only thing that wasn't always monitored by both the Astrocitus and the Ghidorah. "So Terra, her Astrod-Delphia, me and my 2 sisters, we played with time. Going in the far future, as far as we safely could, you being the most important for her." She paused. Caelicitas absorbed everything like a sponge. It was unclear on the dinner detail, but Io was probably traumatized. Ghidorah's heads are more than simply another head, they are one and separate being at the same time. She had the equivalent of 2 deaths of loved ones and herself. Giant space monster or not, it has an impact on the one going through this. He didn't know the extent of what time does as a backlash, but how Ergia, he deduced it was the nameless Astrod-Delphia's name, was an example of what might happen. You were the only thing that truly counted for her when we finally finished the time jump. I can't blame her. I know how it felt, to fear, to despair, to feel your heart be crushed as how your child might die. It's a mother's instinct. For me in Terra it was like this, other opinions didn't matter to us. It's why I betrayed my family. They are mere creatures with the only objective being consumption and destruction. Even if their own members. We were also an oddball now that I think about it. She finished her monologue with a self-deprecating chuckle. I can't really say anything meaningful that would make you feel better, but thank you, Calicitas said honestly. Straight to the point, like Terra. Honesty hurts more often than not, but it's better than painting the world to hide how harsh it is. She nodded with a sad smile, her wing fully expanded, and she took flight. Where are you going? We are deep underwater, he inquired, puzzled. She will never be able to even swim to the surface without falling asleep due to exhaustion. Ah yes, indeed, very astute. She landed after those words, curling around herself before falling asleep without a care in the world. She was going to sleep outside and absorb the gamma ray in space, but she might have made errors in the judgments of her current capability. Good night I guess, he mumbled. He sent a mental message to the Astrod-Delphia about who is the white dragon, that they need to monitor her and that they are forbidden to do anything harmful directly or indirectly to her without him directly ordering it. He indeed was deeply grateful for what she has done and will forever be, but he was seeing multiple scenarios where everything can potentially turn to shit. I will continue to ask questions when she wakes up. If she takes too long I will wake her myself, the whale thought, plans on how to wake her up already forming in his mind. Of course, it was nothing remotely bad. She was exhausted and he knew it, but he didn't believe that he was patient enough at the moment to wait possibly hundreds of years. 39. Life goes on. Calicitas POV. Now how to make it possible to accelerate her healing, I wondered. She was in very bad shape. Physically she was alright, but that stopped here. I could see that her soul was damaged and healing. She would already be healed if she didn't serve as a generator to the entire city for millions of Earth years. Io fed on energy, so potentially making wormholes from here to the sun should help her recover. Granted that I know shit about the Ghidorah physiologies, but I can already make theories on what should help her. I know she suffered greatly, but the repeated mention of the Great Void is unsettling. A mystery that I know is bad, apocalyptic on a universal scale, if more kinda bad. I want answers. I'm not a good whale, never thought of myself as such, and I will make sure she survives and makes a full recovery. If not, at least for what she has done for me and Mom. No mind reading or any such thing. First, I can't do it. Even if Alan potentially could, I will not do it. I kinda respect her. I summoned dozens of small wormholes leading directly to an area millions of kilometers above the surface of the sun and where solar eruptions are less likely to happen. She groaned in pleasure, absorbing a part of the energy through her scales. I stayed like this for 5 weeks, sometimes teleporting to the icy surface of Triton to eat the atmosphere and warped back down there. Always maintaining the wormholes. At the same time, I worked with a group of Astrod-Delphii to make permanent portals between the different celestial bodies inhabited and claimed by me. Basically Stargate, but better and bigger and restricted to certain individuals for use. The Astrod-Delphii can solicit, more like pray to me, not really my fault, for me to create a wormhole from point A to point B. All of this through the hive mind, only when it's necessary they do ask. As if I'm gonna be offended. They are essential to all my children, but that's why the Stargates, it's mostly for them to feel better about themselves. They can make wormholes to travel through hyperspace, but it needs a squad of 100 strong, and the jump can barely do Selim, Mars, Earth a small distance even in the Sol system. Protect Lady Io from any harm at all cost and don't hesitate to call me. That's an order, I informed Corky too, my body glowing gold ready to space jump away. It was routine. Also, she prefers red suns and thus where the current wormholes lead to. I need to always be on alert. Space isn't fixed, everything moved. At your order, my emperor, was her immediate reply. I could hear her bark order in the buzzing background that was in my minds. Never alone, ever again. It feels so right to have that constant buzz of talking, debates, discussions, sharing, and arguing in the back of my minds. Something that would probably make a human go insane in less than a minute, but I'm way past that point. I could feel the trace of fear and arousal from one quirky male Astrod-Delphia as he was ordered. Quirky as in he had machine guns attached to his body, his name SDMG or Space Dolphin Machine Gun, like the weapon in that video game called Terraria. He is one of the most normal ones, if anyone can qualify as this. Being captured or living in captivity all your life does wonders for mental health. They weren't that far behind humans in terms of intellectual capabilities when they weren't ascended, as they like to call it. And even if they were dumber, that usually has the same result on mental health in animals with a certain level of intelligence. Anyway, the little girl's name is Madison. I could have fried her brain when I shut down the hive mind by accident. She takes her current life-changing transformation pretty well. Most of the changes are internal at the moment. I pretty much ruined her life, no, ended her human's life, as I did too many. Certainly it was more drastic. As in no life at all. She will soon enough be part of the hive mind. I'm a monster by human standards at every point. The fact that they are individuals, worse than me, doesn't matter here. It never did. I can and did and will continue to toy with the life of others and life, simply because I'm stronger and I'm an arrogant, hypocritical, nihilistic asshole of a whale and more. It's not a good reason. Yes, it isn't. Never thought it was. It simply is. Why would a kid have any right to drown an ant colony or a farmer to burn forests to grow soy? It's nature, the ones with powers can decide. She couldn't connect to the hive mind, but I can feel her, where she exactly is, and her general state of emotions. Maddie hid what is happening to her from her mother, who only recently noticed that something changed with her daughter. Work first, everything after. Not the best mother. She started to puke blood 2 weeks ago, not because she was dying, her body was purging itself. Pretty gruesome. At least she doesn't pass by the dying step, or maybe she will, don't know. I didn't talk to her. If Alan's words are to be trusted, it would blow her mind, her head would compress then implode. What do humans call it? Ah. Yes. Like putting rubber bands around a Citrulus lanatus. It's all in theory, but I seriously doubt a human infant, even a mutated one by your majesty, can survive a direct conversation with you. Ironically, it's something I did to one of the handlers, but her head replaced the watermelon. The spectacular result was the same thought. So I don't want Maddie to end like this. She is already treated as an oracle. Let's make this official, but first, the transformation must be finished. Crack. I entered hyperspace and swam around for a bit, observing the epileptic and chaotic landscape. Relaxed in this maelstrom, I opened a slip in space that led to the Reverend Insanity universe and the one connected to it. But even here I always have my intentions on Io. Maintaining the wormholes, making sure no solar eruption happened or other unpredicted cosmic events. I started with one of my eyes at the old man, a ghost of his past self in more than one way. He is dead but alive, magic mumbo-jumbo that I don't fully understand, nor exactly care past the curiosity, because it will not exactly work outside of this universe. And only work this way in this one. But how it is installed in this universe will still help me in my project to create my own. He is a funny guy. Obsessed to find his way home like a certain alien, and also with more than a few screws loose, but who cares? I teleported a random piece of rock from Selim and wrote with them in the void. Hello Ben Gia Sunday. How has life at the edge of this universe been treating you? His eyes goes ever so wider, and he smiled. He moved his left hand, and a strange animal that looked like the eldritch spawn of a crane and a starfish appeared. In the same manner, he wrote in front of the wormhole. Good. Boring but good. And UK Li Che Toche. Ah. His name is so hard to write. He is doing it on purpose. Right. Supreme Grandmaster of his art, I thought, amused, the ever so slight and irritating smirk visible on his wrinkled face. Millennial old fuck. 40, Kaiser. Ben Jia Sun, also known as the thieving heaven demon Venerable, a 7 millennia-old half-otherworldly demon, was giggling as the great space whale made a wormhole that led to a planet called Dirt in front of a certain evil protagonist. It was more of a screen than a wormhole due to certain limitations. He found the name of the planet silly, but what did he know, is the worst after all. It still baffled him that this creature could tear and travel through the fabric of space and time with no real technique but his natural capacity to do so like a bird. A being he was not sure of beating even when he was still alive, something at least equal if not above a venerable. How enviable. Caelicitas was also the key for him to go back to his world, but he could wait. See, this is where the effeminate guy is from, Caelicitas wrote. The wormhole was in front of the said guy, a young human male, with jade-like skin, black hair, and deep black eyes. He was himself starting the portal. Face blank, void of any emotions. Fong Yuan was confused, something he rarely if ever was. Ah, by the way, everything from this universe is merely a story in another. Whatever you struggled, worked, lived, dreamed, thought, or loved can always be considered made up, and such can also be considered meaningless. Also, if you want immortality so badly, why the fuck you don't do your magic mumbo-jumbo with genetics? Easier said than done, but you are smart and extremely talented. Don't tell me this is too much. And this is just an option for many. Don't be the puppet of the heaven and earth blah blah blah. No need to thank me. By the whale merely wrote with the flock, to Fong Yuan before the wormhole disappeared into nothingness. Fong Yuan stared at the closing wormhole. He didn't know if he should feel insulted, offended, praised, terrified, or the four together. This being made a portal while I'm in my aperture. It knows me, and if what it's telling is true, so does it do my past, future, and present. How infuriating to be left with so little control, he said coldly, but it was an eye-opener experience. There were more than poems from his past life. He was no scientist, but he could have done so much more. Not that he regretted anything that he ever did, but this reminder changed things and gave him new ideas, and he apparently was a puppet. Is he another plan for you to get out of the goo world? Or otherworldly demons in general? You know me doing this is already dangerous for me in this universe if the will of the heaven is crazy enough, Caelicitas wrote. You didn't know this, the old man asked, frowning slightly. Of course not. The author stopped writing because it displeased some high-placed people, mortal as you'll call them, an insignificant waste of space as I would, and even if it wasn't the case, the information in the book might not even accurately translate to this reality, the whale explained his simple reasoning. Common sense. And you won't stop me? Not at all. Do what you want, but different universes have different rules. As you probably deduced, I do not control space directly but gravity, one of the 4 fundamental laws. It works in nearly all universes but not so much for you. You see, your powers will go against the way other universes usually work, and unless you can resist this you will simply become dark energy. Now stop asking stupid questions, you senile old man, the whale wrote back. Clearly, Caelicitas didn't take many things seriously, as most didn't even deserve to be taken like this for him. It was like everything he talked to was a mentally retarded child with Alzheimer's at stage 7 and advanced brain cancer. They weren't dumb, for most, it is just unfair to compare them to him. 1 month later. Madison Russell, just having woken up, was in the bathroom staring at her left eye in the mirror face in disbelief. She knew she was changing, but it never really hit that hard. From her blood turning neon blue and colder than the freezing temperature of the water, but still somehow kept her skin as warm as normal humans would, and the vein kept looking human. It didn't change how she looked, but this. The girl's left eye was not how a human eye should look like. The white part, the sclera, was venta black, sucking in the surrounding light, while the pupil was glowing golden. She blinked and it was back to its usual color, brown eyes and white sclera. Do I tell Mom? No. That's a bad idea, she mumbled, heart thumping in her chest from fear and apprehension mixed with excitement. It's a slow process, though Caelicitas, for the brief time her eye changed, he could see through it like it was his own. Very disturbing to see the world from such a small, insignificant point of view. Humans were so small. Far away in a corner of the universe, the cry of Space Godzilla eventually arrived where it was intended. Deep inside the core of a long-dead planet was a black and golden three-headed dragon. Their body shapes are similar to Descadora, sporting two long tails covered in ragged black spike, a pair of golden bat-like wings, for scaly and muscular limbs, the two at the front strangely looking like humanoid arms, three heads each with a distinct crown of horns, the middle one with the most sophisticated. Each started to emit a bestial growl from their respective head, making the earth surrounding them rumble and break apart in response. The middle one's pure red eyes slowly opened, revealing a blood-red slitted pupil, awakening from his billions of years-old slumber. Black forked tongue flicking out tasting the dusty air, the middle head suddenly moved aggressively, biting the throat of the right one. Immediately fully awake he hissed in anger before taking a more submissive position when he was roared at the back by the middle one. The left head, uncaring at what his brother was doing, grumbled, groggily waking up he yawned. "Our pet died," the middle head said, his voice slow, ancient, and earth-shaking. "Like the trash it was, what a disappointment," continued the left and right in perfect unison, their voice being nearly identical. "We will see what happened, and punishment to the one who dared to do this will be done," the middle one affirmed, barely holding his urge to lash out at everything out of anger. Their body was slimmer than usual, band borderline skinny, indicating that they needed nutrition. And the sun of this stellar system will do wonders for their endless hunger.